Hello and welcome to the latest Insights Live, Making Early Retirement a Reality. I'm Susie Allen, Vice President of Insights from Fidelity Wealth Management. Thank you for joining us today and for submitting questions during registration. They've helped shape our discussion. Now, here at Fidelity, we help clients with all aspects of financial planning, and retirement is a key part of that plan. Today, we're going to talk about assessing whether your savings will support early retirement, filling gaps in income and healthcare coverage, and emotional aspects of this decision that you may not have considered. Today, I'm joined by two Fidelity professionals who have spent many years working with clients, Jennifer Selwood, a Vice President Financial Consultant in Minnesota, and Jeff Edwards, a Regional Vice President Planning Solutions in Utah. And I'm joining you from Albany today, here at our lovely Investor Center, where I've been thinking about retirement as I've been spending time up in the Adirondacks. But let's talk about early retirement. Now, early retirement is a phase that a phrase that everyone may define differently. And for some, it's a dream. For others, it may be an unplanned event. And so for the purposes of this show, Jeff, welcome back and thank you for joining us today. Can you explain what we mean by early retirement?
Yeah, thanks, Susie. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. That is a great question. And when we were born, we didn't necessarily come with a retirement date. My grandparents, they retired closer to age 70, and my own dad had a hard stop at age 60, and he did it. He retired on his 60th birthday. And now I'm in my 50s, and I'm looking forward to my own retirement someday soon. And some people think about the retirement date as being determined by a government plan, such as Social Security between the ages of 62 and 70. And they ask, when will I be able to replace my paycheck with Social Security? Or when will I be eligible to replace my health insurance at work with Medicare? And what matters just as much as timing is the why. Sometimes it's exciting. It may mean more freedom or more time with family up in the mountains of northern New York. For some, there are unexpected reasons for early retirement. For example, you may experience a layoff during a slow economy and you are unable to find another job. You may have a health event that prevents you from being able to perform your work. And I've seen some people retire early to take care of family, like helping watch their grandchildren while their own children work, or they help care for a parent because of the increasing costs of care. Many people are retiring earlier and are living longer. That means you have more retirement years that you may need to solve for. Either way, when you retire earlier, you're asking more from your money because you've got fewer years to save and more years to live off of it.
Jeff, thank you for that definition. And certainly that asking more of your money resonates with me. Jen, also welcome back. Great to have you here today. And we know you work with clients every day to help create retirement plans. Now, if a client comes to you and says they want to or need to retire early, how does that change the discussion?
Well, thanks for having me back, first and foremost. It's great to be here. And when we're planning for retirement, really at any age, we focus on addressing key risks and considerations. So think about longevity, inflation, market risk, whether that be your asset allocation or how you're invested, spending, and healthcare. All of these apply when considering an early retirement, but there are a few additional things that we actually want to consider. First and foremost, one, helping a client design a plan to ensure that they have sufficient savings to cover a desired lifestyle over a much longer period of time, especially given the unknowns of what that lifestyle might look like decades from now. It likely doesn't look like exactly like it does today. Two, potential gaps in income. For some people, that might look like bridging income from early retirement until they can tap retirement accounts penalty-free, which is age 59 and a half. And or beginning to take Social Security. We know that you can take Social Security the earliest at 62, full retirement is 67, and then you can push that all the way to 70. Three, we want to look for potential gaps in healthcare coverage. So when asked about the biggest concern in retirement and deciding on an early retirement, I can tell you that the majority of my clients tend to say healthcare almost every single time. Four, having an asset allocation and investment strategy to balance income needs and growth. Finally, another big consideration in early retirement really has absolutely nothing to do with finances and it's often overlooked. This would be the psychology of retirement, how to spend your time, how to feel fulfilled, what wakes you up and lights you up in the morning. I hear this all the time from clients, but I'll use a big example like Jeff did, and that's my dad. He was planning an early retirement. He was very successful in his work life. He loved to work. And when he started talking about it, our whole family was like, okay, how are you going to do that? Right? So we were really doubtful that he was going to be successful in retirement. Well, he actually hired a coach a year before he retired, and he didn't want the word retirement to be connected with that because he felt like that was kind of the end of his life. So he called it renewalment. So he worked with this coach for an entire year because it was so important to him to be just as successful in his renewalment as he was in his actual working life. I completely understand this is not your typical example, but really an important part of retirement planning is actually considering what it looks like to completely outside of the financial picture.
And thank you for outlining all of those issues and sharing that example of your dad. That's an interesting term. All right, so we're going to drill down into all these different aspects. So Jen, sticking with you, let's start with savings. How do you assess whether a client's savings can support their retirement?
Absolutely. Well, when it comes down to a successful financial retirement, it absolutely comes down to lifestyle. And for that reason, it's really important for us to understand expenses. I always tell my clients we'll base the success of the plan on the total of their expenses. So looking at all of their expenses, because I don't want them to change their lifestyle in retirement. That being said, we like to understand the difference between essential and lifestyle expenses when we begin that income planning conversation. We believe at Fidelity that all essential expenses should be covered by a guaranteed source of income. Think Social Security, pensions, annuities, things like that. Once we've determined the budget, then we can look at all of your assets to determine how to best deploy them. We focus on 3 specific strategies while deploying our assets: emergency, protection, and growth. So first of all, emergency. That's exactly what it sounds like. It's cash savings for the unexpected. We know life can be wildly unexpected, so we want to make sure that we've got that emergency bucket handled. I like to refer to this as cash comfort with my clients. And to be honest with you, it varies greatly from client to client. I have clients that would not sleep well at night if they didn't have $1 million in cash. That's a little bit excessive, but I do have them. I also have clients that feel like they're missing out if they have like $10,000 on the sidelines. So when we think about that emergency bucket, a general guideline here would be for emergency reserves about 6 to 12 months worth of expenses. The next bucket we want to look at is protection. In this space, we look at either principal or income, depending on the specific plans and needs. This is an extremely important part of the planning process because it helps buffer the unknowns within the market. Lastly, the growth bucket. This is the portion of the assets that are actually in the market as is vested to cover lifestyle over the course of many decades. We'll talk about more of the growth portfolio portion of this in a bit, but assuming that we have emergency covered and protection covered, you have a lot of flexibility when it comes to that growth bucket.
Yeah, that's a great framework, Jen. And I just wanted to add, I get asked all the time for a specific number or savings guideline. A typical one you might see is that you need to have 12 to 14 times your income saved at ages 62 and 64 respectively. But in my experience, those guidelines, they can be misleading because, as Jen said, they don't account for lifestyle and the expenses. And what's more important is understanding your cash flow and how you might fill any income gaps. I also encourage clients to think about liquidity, not just total assets, because even if you have significant wealth, you need the ability to access it when life happens. Some of those emergencies, as Jen mentioned. Living out west, I've seen everything from an AC not working in July in Arizona, personally that was expensive, to a full roof replacement due to rotting in Seattle, Washington. A recent study from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College found that 83% of retired households experience at least one unplanned cost every year, typically about 10% of their income. Those types of emergencies we can plan for.
Thank you, Jeff. Wanted to talk about expenses a little bit. So how do retirement expenses typically change over time, especially for early retirees who may be looking at a multi-decade retirement?
Yeah, what I've seen with clients is retirement isn't necessarily a flat, smooth line when it comes to spending. Early on, I noticed people really go after it. There is the travel, the home projects, those bucket list items. It's a very active phase of life and it costs money. For early retirees, especially the go phase, it can last longer. So it's really important to plan for it. You have more time on your hands, and it's likely you'll spend more than you think. In fact, I once had a client who told me he thought he only needed to withdraw about $60,000 a year from his retirement accounts. But every year we looked at his total withdrawals, it was closer to 90 or $100,000 once he factored in everything else he was doing. Then spending, it tends to level out a bit in those middle years of retirement. I've heard of this phase referred to as the slow go years. I'm just tired. I want to take a nap. But then later in life, we start to go into those no go years. Expenses can really pick up again. Usually it's because of healthcare or other support needs. Unfortunately, you may not be doing as much of the fun stuff you wanted to do when you first retired.
Thank you, Jeff. We want to switch gears a little bit to talk a bit more about healthcare as well.
So Fidelity puts out a survey in terms of estimated retirees' healthcare costs every year in midsummer. So last summer's survey found that a 65-year-old retiring in 2025 can expect to spend about an average of $172,500 in healthcare and medical expenses throughout retirement. Let that sink in for just 1 second, $172,500. This is beyond what Medicare pays for, and this often doesn't include many types of long-term care expenses, such as skilled nursing care. Chances are that that number will be even higher moving forward. Historically, costs have been rising faster than the rate of inflation. In fact, in our financial plans, we currently inflate all of our expenses at 2.5%, but we do inflate healthcare at 4.9% for this very reason.
Those are certainly daunting costs to cover. And of course, medical costs could be even higher for those who may be considering retiring before they are 65 and eligible for Medicare, as you noted. So what are some of the options to bridge that healthcare coverage gap?
Well, there's essentially about 4 options to consider here. One would be coverage through a spouse. So if spouse or partner, so if somebody is retiring in your family, you could go on that other person's medical plan. 2 would be COBRA, and COBRA is a federal law that allows you to continue on your employer's plan for up to 18 months. The third place is plans on the open marketplace, and lastly would be private insurance. For most of my clients, quite honestly, Susie, we start with COBRA as the first option. While we're working, your employer typically covers a significant portion of your coverage. With COBRA, you may be required to pay the full cost of healthcare coverage, plus potentially an additional 2% charge. Still, this is often more cost effective than actually buying your own insurance. But once COBRA is exhausted, typically the public marketplace is the next place we'll consider. For many subsidies on the exchange, the only factor that determines your benefit is income. In some states, there are specific income thresholds to qualify for credits on the exchange plans. For this reason, and you'll hear me say this a lot, we're always going to go back to your specific plan, but we look at how to position your income strategy just so that we can mitigate taxable income so that you may be able to qualify for some of these medical credits. Another factor to consider is Medicare premium costs. Many of my clients believe that it's important to keep working until the exact age 65 because then we can turn that Medicare on right away. What you might not be considering, though, is that the Medicare premiums are set based on income, so they are income-based, and they actually have a 2-year look back. So working past 63 can oftentimes increase your medical premiums. Of course, we talk this through plan per plan, but these are the things we would consider in this space.
Helpful, and I think that 2-year look back is an interesting point. So many of our clients may be eligible to save in health savings accounts or HSAs. Can those be used to bridge a healthcare coverage gap?
Great question, and one we get asked all the time. Absolutely. If you pay qualified medical expenses out of an HSA, the money that you take out is tax-free at any age. So you put it in, you get that tax deduction, it grows, and then when it comes out, it is tax-free. However, note that HSAs generally cannot be used to pay for private healthcare premiums. There are a few exceptions, however. So that would allow you to use your HSA for healthcare premiums. These would be, you can use them for healthcare coverage purchased through an employer-sponsored plan through COBRA. So you can use it for that. You can also use it to pay healthcare coverage while receiving unemployment benefits.
Done. Jeff, let's bring you back in. You mentioned the possibility of an income gap, especially if someone is under the age of 59 and a half when they can tap their retirement accounts penalty-free. So what strategies are available to help with the income gap?
Yeah, great question again, Susie, especially for our topic today. Because when people retire early, they're often not dealing with just one gap. They may be trying to bridge several different milestones, as Jen mentioned. Maybe they retire at 57 and need income until age 59 and a half. Then they need to bridge to Social Security at 62 or beyond. Then there's that Medicare at age 65. So part of our job is helping clients map out where that income will come from during each phase. And one strategy is simply being intentional about where you've saved your money over the years. We can look at drawing from different account types in a tax-aware way. For example, non-retirement brokerage accounts or savings accounts can provide flexibility before age 59 and a half. Roth assets may create additional flexibility depending on the circumstances, and we can coordinate withdrawals to help manage those taxes over time. We also look at opportunities that may allow access to retirement accounts sooner than people realize. Another option is to create additional predictable income. Sometimes that comes from a pension. Sometimes it comes from a lifetime income annuity. And the goal is to determine whether there's a gap between essential expenses and the guaranteed income. And if so, whether creating another source of reliable income makes sense. And I think one of the most overlooked strategies is continuing to work in some capacity. Retirement today doesn't necessarily mean stopping work altogether. I've seen clients do anything from consulting, teaching, work seasonally. That's what I'm thinking personally. I'd like to work up at Deer Valley and Park City and be a lift operator. I could volunteer or turn a hobby into income. In many cases, even a modest amount of earned income can significantly reduce pressure on the portfolio during those early retirement years.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing about that encore career. Part-time work is certainly a good strategy to bridge that income gap. So Jen, are there any potential financial impacts of working in retirement that clients may want to consider?
Well, I would say to Jeff's point, it is very popular for clients to turn their hobbies into something fun. I can't tell you how many clients work at golf courses now. So, but let's say you do go back to work after retirement. There are benefits, but a few things to keep in mind. Even if you have a part-time job or some consulting income, your paycheck can affect the amount of your Social Security benefits. The amount you owe in taxes for that year, of course, and your Medicare premium. So it could impact all of those things. We know for sure it would impact the taxation. Before full retirement age for Social Security, income above a certain limit, just so you're aware, for 2026, that limit is $24,480, will cause your benefits to be reduced $1 for every $2 of earned income over that income limit. The good news here is that Social Security benefit isn't really lost. Once you reach full retirement age, your Social Security check will be increased to account for the benefits withheld earlier due to excess earnings. Earnings may also push you into a higher threshold for your Medicare premiums once you are over age 65 and enrolled in Medicare. If your income is above a certain level, you may also have to pay IRMAA, which is the income monthly adjusted amount on your Medicare premium. So all these things should be taken into account when we think about working after you're fully retired from your full-time position.
We'll do a deep dive on all of these. So let's start with withdrawing from retirement accounts. Jeff mentioned options for early withdrawals from retirement accounts. And Jen, can you expand on that a bit, please?
I'd be happy to. There's so many things to consider when you're taking money out pre-59 and a half. So let's just think about different types of accounts. So for 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, Roth IRAs, the age for penalty-free withdrawals is 59 and a half. That said, there are ways to take distributions earlier. So let's talk about those a little bit more in detail. So with the Roth IRA, you can withdraw your direct contributions, now not the earnings, but just your contributions, anytime penalty free. So since Roth contributions are made with after-tax dollars, there are also no taxes on that contribution withdrawal. But typically, we recommend keeping assets within the Roth as it grows tax deferred and it's distributed tax-free, assuming the 5-year vesting period has been met. So while we can access tax-free, penalty-free money from the Roths, typically we suggest that you keep the money within the Roth for that long term. There is an IRS rule called the Rule of 55. And this allows individuals to take penalty-free withdrawals from employers' workplace plans like a 401k, 403b account if you separate from service with that employer in the year that you turn 55 or later. There are a few factors to keep in mind here. One, the Rule of 55 does not apply to IRAs or to former 401ks that were rolled into an IRA. So prior to making a decision on rolling workplace plans, it's important to understand the pros and cons of staying in your workplace plan based on your personal financial plan. We can say plan a lot here. Two, plan rules can vary. So also very important to understand your specific workplace plan rules. Many plans do not offer partial withdrawals once you've left your job. This could mean you need to withdraw the entire account balance at once, and this could potentially incur taxes even if the penalty is waived here. Three, there can be significant consequences to your long-term savings if we're obviously draining those retirement assets too early and not appropriate based on your plan. Another interesting consideration for Rule 55 is that it also applies to net unrealized appreciation. I bring this up because in Minnesota, we have a lot of clients who have amassed company stock within their 401ks. So net unrealized appreciation allows for plan participants to distribute their company stock into a brokerage account and only pay tax on the basis of that stock. The benefit of this now, we can potentially create more non-qualified assets to bridge the retirement income gap. An important part to consider in pursuing net unrealized appreciation is that the entire 401k actually has to be emptied in the calendar year that you would execute that. So meaning if we were to execute NUA, we would have to roll the remaining balance out of the 401k into an IRA. So let's just keep saying all these complicated IRS terms. So while we're at it, so another one would be Rule of 72. This rule allows for participants to take series of substantially equal periodic payments, repeat that one, for retirement accounts pre-59.5. Unlike the Rule of 55, this also applies to your IRAs. So while this is more flexible in terms of the account types it works for, it is not a very popular method to implement. The income the income taken out is determined by an IRS calculation, which in the market is typically unattractive as it doesn't generate enough income based on the actual capital outlay required to get that income. So that IRS calculation is not very forgiving, is what I'm trying to say in terms of the amount of income. It also doesn't offer flexibility. If turned on, it must be implemented for 5 years or until you reach 59.5, whichever is longer. And then once that's implemented, you cannot alter or change that for any reason without risk of penalty. So while these rules are in place to help pre-59.5, it's extremely important to understand them in your specific financial plan prior to implementing.
Jen, thank you so much. I know we received some questions during registration around those rules, so I appreciate you taking time to talk through those and use the word plan repeatedly. So I'm going to say it here too. Clearly, tax strategies play a big role in planning for early retirement. So you're not off the hot seat yet. Can you explain how you help clients in your practice with tax efficient withdrawals from their accounts?
I would love to, Susie. So our goal is to be as efficient as possible when it comes to financial planning. And as we all know, a huge part of that is tax strategy. So as is evidenced just by those above tax rules, this can be a complicated conversation. So when we do income planning for retirees, one of the biggest considerations is obviously that tax planning. This is where asset location, meaning what account you're saving your money in, is really important when thinking about early retirement. Ideally, you would have a mix of accounts so you have flexibility on withdrawals. I met with a client last week that he's actually taking an unplanned early retirement. He also heard about this webinar, so he might be listening to this right now. He is 54, turning 55 in October, and his job was actually being eliminated at the end of July. He has saved incredibly well and has engaged in planning with me over the last several years. So his plan is wildly healthy and he can do this. His biggest concern was really how, A, does he have enough? Yes, he does. B, how do we, solve for income pre-59 and a half? And then of course, lifestyle and retirement. What is he going to do to keep busy? His current portfolio is comprised of savings, of course, non-qualified brokerage account, Roth, an IRA, and a 401k. Looking at the plan, our goal, and we have the flexibility here just based on that asset location, our goal here is to stay under the 12% federal tax bracket so as not to incur capital gains tax, and also, of course, to avoid any pre-59 and a half penalties. When we're thinking about this income strategy, now not specifically to this client, but we suggest setting up distributions from 401k without penalty to fill up the federal tax bracket. Again, rule of 55. This helps clients to be efficient with taxes now and also reduces required minimum distributions or RMDs in the future. Then we're going to look at some non-qualified assets to supplement income. This can be coming from savings and or brokerage accounts. If invested, the tax consequence here would be capital gain if we had to sell a concentrated position. But we have tax efficient strategies here at Fidelity to help reduce those taxes as well. Typically, like I mentioned earlier, we probably wouldn't touch the Roth as they do have that lifetime tax-free growth potential, and they also transfer to heirs tax-free. But if we did need additional income, we certainly would look to the Roth basis for additional tax-free income if we needed it. So back to my client, how we solved for him in terms of his income, we use this multifaceted approach, accessing the Rule of 55 from his 401k, supplementing from his savings and his brokerage account because we needed a little additional income. We also implemented an income annuity because that helps us to avoid penalty in his IRA. Jeff, you're going to talk more about how this strategy can be super efficient next, I believe.
That's right. And hello to Jen's client. Hope you are joining us today. So perfect segue to that discussion about predictable income. And we do receive a lot of questions around annuities. So Jeff, come on in. How might they help bridge the income gap for early retirees?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great example, Jen, of having the growth, the guarantees, and flexibility. But at the end of the day, retirement planning is it's a cash flow exercise. The first question I ask is, what expenses absolutely have to be paid every month, no matter what? So some people think of housing, utilities, groceries, insurance. And for most people, those are the essential expenses. Then we look at guaranteed income sources already available. We talked about Social Security is usually the foundation. Some people may also have a pension, but those may not be available yet because we're talking about early retirement today. Income annuities represent a contract with an insurance company that allows you to convert a portion of your retirement savings, an amount that you choose, into a predictable stream of income for the rest of your life, similar to having a pension. You give up access to your lump sum in exchange for regular income payments now or in the future. And these payments for single or joint annuitants could last a set period of time or for a lifetime. The trade-off is you're giving up access and control of assets used to fund this type of annuity. There are other fixed income annuity options that provide access to the principal. The trade-off here, as compared to the previous annuity, is that access will reduce the future income payments and typically comes with a slightly lower income payment. Using this strategy for lifetime income pre-age 59 and a half instead of early withdrawal from a retirement account, it avoids that 10% early withdrawal penalty that Jen mentioned.
Jeff, thanks for bringing more color into that. I think this is a really interesting conversation for all retirees, but quite honestly, income annuities become very attractive pre-59 and a half. One, to your point, we avoid that 10% penalty on income. And two, the break even on the contracts occur at a relatively young age. So one specific example of this is with a client I met with, another one last week. His current 401k was relatively small compared to his IRA. And so because he's only been at his current role for a few years. So while we can and will access his 401k for Rule of 55, it wasn't enough to cover what we wanted for a lifestyle. So we did discuss that guaranteed income annuity. So in this example, I wanted to just give some high-level numbers. We were able to annuitize about $1 million out of his portfolio, which will generate $65,000 annually with 100% joint and survivor benefits for the remainder of his lifetime. Should he predecease his spouse, that 100% survivorship will go to her. So both of them would be covered under this contract for the length of either one of their lives. Which in effect, they will exceed this contract premium between ages 69 and 70. So that's relatively young, right? So this solves for income gap, eliminates the 10% penalty, and also has some pretty compelling future tax benefits in reference to required minimum distributions.
A great example, Jen, and hello to your client. Jeff, help us understand, how do you help clients decide how much of their savings to annuitize?
Yeah, that's great. And Jen gave us 2 examples there. So it's easy for me to say we could customize it to every individual. It depends on them and their situation. And I often remind clients that we're trying to solve for several retirement risks at once. So there's that longevity. I'm worried that I'm going to live longer than I expected. There's the market volatility side of it, especially early in retirement. There's inflation. We know things are going to cost more in the future. And then another one is withdrawal rate risk. But for some clients, the guaranteed lifetime income, it can help address those concerns and provide the peace of mind. I had a client tell me, Jeff, I don't necessarily want the highest account balance. I want the highest confidence level. That's a very different conversation. And for that client, knowing that a certain amount of income would show up every month, regardless of what the market was doing, helped them sleep better at night. At the same time, there's a big trade-off, right? Every dollar that goes into an annuity is a dollar that may not be as liquid or available for other goals. So you could be giving up some of that growth. You might be giving up some of that liquidity. That's why I rarely view it as an all or nothing decision. And in most cases, it's about finding that right balance between the guaranteed income, the liquidity, and then continuing to have that growth potential. And think of it like building a house. The guaranteed income, those sources are the foundation. Once that foundation is strong, we can use the rest of the portfolio to pursue the growth, combat inflation, create some flexibility for those life changes, and support any future goals. And ultimately, the right amount to annuitize, it isn't determined by any rule of thumb. It's determined by what helps that specific client feel confident that they can maintain their lifestyle throughout retirement. Just as Jen mentioned, her 2 different clients, 2 different scenarios, 2 different annuity types.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's talk about another common source of guaranteed income, and we talked about it briefly earlier, and that's Social Security. You can start those payments as early as age 62, which may be especially appealing for early retirees. Now, Jen, how can someone decide when to take Social Security?
Well, this is not going to surprise you, Susie, but we're going to go back to the plan. And then when we look at that plan, we know, as Susie mentioned, Social Security can be turned on as early as 62 and all the way to 70. For the purposes of our conversation today, full retirement is actually age 67. So if you do choose to take Social Security earlier than that, you need to be aware of a couple of things. That income limit that I discussed earlier, that doesn't apply after full retirement, but currently if you turn it on pre-67, you have that income limit of the $24,480 annually. Second, your benefit currently grows at 8% per year up to age 70. So to put this in perspective, if you turn your Social Security on at 62, you're giving up that guaranteed growth on it. So if you turn that on at 62, you can expect about a 30% reduction in monthly benefits, with lesser reductions, of course, as you get closer to that full retirement age. There is a break-even age at which the total benefits from delaying Social Security surpass the total benefits you would have if you received them early. That being said, if you are supplementing income with assets, the other thing to think about is you could be giving up market growth by delaying that Social Security. In terms of Social Security planning, we look at, again, your specific plan and help you determine the most appropriate time to turn it on. We're going to discuss those breakpoints. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly how long you're going to live, so we have to use some assumptions in here. But then we can actually model in scenarios. And I'm excited for Jeff to talk about this because it shows things super clearly.
Well then, Jeff, lots of variables when it comes to projecting retirement expenses and income. How can Fidelity help?
Well, when you work with a financial consultant like Jen at Fidelity, we're able to model different scenarios for you using our planning tools. We can show you what the potential impact on your plan will be based off of your different Social Security projections. Also, we can model in how retiring earlier may impact your analysis. We can explore other scenarios like spending more, changing your tolerance for risk, or different market model changes. There's even one scenario we could say, what if I pay off my mortgage early? What impact would that have on my plan? And we can see how those decisions impact your plan over time. We keep saying that word plan. I think it's important to have a plan. It's not about giving you one answer. It's about stress testing the plan so you can make informed trade-offs. And that tends to give people a lot more confidence because they're not guessing. They're seeing how their decisions could play out. And we'll show you where you stand today. We'll provide helpful insights that may improve your retirement outlook. And then we'll work with you to help you reach your goals. So whether you're working with an advisor using our scenario modeling tools and calculators, or starting with our planning center on your own, start now, start somewhere. That is the most important.
Thank you, Jeff. Earlier we had been talking about planning for a multi-decade retirement. Spent time with my family thinking of my husband's grandmother, who's 102, and her identical twin sister. So long retirement there. So how do you approach investing for a multi-decade retirement?
This is probably the most important part, especially if you're going to live to 102. That's amazing. We talked about the emergency and protection, so we have those built in. So now we want to talk about that just critical role of growth in your portfolio. This manages those risks like longevity and inflation. And when we're looking at multi-decade retirements, this is wildly important. Portfolios with more stocks have historically produced more growth over a long term of time. And I think we can all agree on that. But what they also have is bigger price swings. So it's really critical that we factor in risk tolerance, and we're having this conversation with clients. With a high allocation to stocks might hypothetically allow you to withdraw more money from your portfolio each year. That assumption rests on your ability to stay invested during times of volatility. So, think about this in terms of COVID in 2020. What happened in March of 2020? We had a big swing. Or in 2022, when the market was really rocky, would you be comfortable staying in that ride with that growth portfolio during those times? So again, very important that we understand your appetite for risk. And as Jeff described, we can model different portfolios to find that balance of risk and growth to determine our recommendations for clients' asset allocation. So it's a really great visual that we can actually show clients now in that space. Next, we factor in taxes. I know we've talked about this a lot. While we need to get the growth allocation correct, we also need to do so in a tax efficient manner. So when we think about that type of strategy here at Fidelity, that type of money management is called goal-based investing as opposed to account-based investing. This means, for example, if our goal allocation was 70-30, so let's assume across all accounts we want to have 70% stock exposure, 30% bonds, and we want to meet that across all accounts, but we want to do that tax efficiently. So in our non-qualified accounts or brokerage accounts, we might hold 100% stock in that portfolio. Whereas in our retirement accounts or IRA tax deferred accounts, we might hold our not as tax efficient holdings there. So that could be more conservative within those accounts. And then our brokerage account is 100%, but combined, we get to that 70-30. So I know that's a lot to think about as we're just talking towards you, but that is something we absolutely look at in terms of our growth strategy. One, we want to make sure we get the allocation correct. Two, we want to make sure that we're doing it tax efficiently.
Thank you. At the beginning of the show, you had mentioned the psychological aspect of early retirement and finding that new identity. So, Jeff, in your experience, what should people consider when deciding if they are ready to make the early retirement leap from an emotional perspective?
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, don't panic. I've seen several people struggle with the social aspects of retirement. You may feel, well, all my friends are at work. Your identity is tied to that role that you have in your career, and you're just not sure where or how will I fill that void. But retiring early, whether you plan for it or is forced upon you, it shouldn't have to be scary. And at Fidelity, we want to help you feel confident in whatever life brings you. And one question I like to ask is, are you retiring from something or to something? Because when someone is retiring to something, a vision, a purpose, they tend to transition much more smoothly. When they're retiring from something, sometimes there's a gap to fill emotionally. I've seen a lot of clients benefit from easing into retirement, perhaps consulting or that part-time work that we mentioned earlier. Volunteering is becoming certainly more popular, or even just taking extended time off to test out the waters. But it gives you a chance to adjust before making it permanent. And the most successful retirements I've seen are very intentional.
I love that, Jeff. And I think it's so accurate. I mean, I think that they're working with clients every single day. I know that there is a huge relief factor to know that you're financially able to retire. But to Jeff's point, this psychological response to retirement can be just as daunting, if you will. But knowing that you have that flexibility to go ahead and retire is a huge thing. I'll use another client example. I met with someone yesterday, and I think this is just really interesting in our short conversation today, is that I'm giving you multiple examples within the last week of early retirees. So it's definitely happening. But a client I spoke with yesterday, their plan is extremely successful. But he told me, he's like, Jen, I don't like the word retirement. It makes me feel old, and I'm not. So he's like, I want to focus on my next chapter. And he's like, I completely understand that I can retire successfully financially right now. But quite honestly, I'm not ready to define that next chapter yet. I need to figure out what I'm passionate about. I need to figure out what lights me up. I need to make sure that as I transition from my career into my retirement, like my dad, that it was as successful as when they were working. So I would say that this is really the good stuff. In terms of what you're excited about and all of those things, but also sometimes can be difficult to think about. So I encourage you to have that thought process and conversation with your advisors as well.
Jen and Jeff, thank you so much. I know we have a couple minutes, so I hope you don't mind. I'm going to pose a couple questions that we are receiving from our live viewers, and these are popular, so I want to make sure you can touch on these both quickly, and then I'll close this out. One is around Roth conversions. So how do Roth conversions factor into early retirement or next chapter strategies, if you will?
Yeah, so Roth conversions are become very popular. I would say, just like all the other things we've talked about, they are common questions, almost every client I chat with. And once again, we're going to go back to your plan. So with Roth conversions, when you can convert from a traditional IRA to a Roth, you can do any amount that you want. But the consideration here is you pay income tax the year that you do that conversion. So we will have that conversation. We can build it into your plan with that scenario planning that Jeff talked about earlier, and just see what makes sense for you. We want to make sure that we're cognizant of the tax consequence, that we aren't bumping against Medicare and things like that, and then also the why behind doing it. So Roths transfer to heirs tax-free, so a lot of times people want to create that for their estate plan. But at the end of the day, we go back to your plan, and Roth conversions are a very powerful tool to mitigate RMDs, to be tax efficient every year in retirement, and then also to pass on a tax-free legacy to your heirs.
And thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to sneak in one last question, and that's on IRMA. People are asking to understand it a little bit more. So can you just give me a little bit more on IRMA, and then I promise that's it.
Sure. Another common question all the time is IRMA. I get, it's always surprising to me in terms of just healthcare because it's confusing. And Medicare definitely is that. I've had clients who thought it was free. It definitely is not that either. So Medicare premiums are based on your income, and there is a 2-year look back in terms of what that income level is. And depending on that income, your Medicare premiums can increase significantly with different tranches of income buckets. And those income limits change every single year. So you just want to be aware that it's out there. I will assure you that when you meet with financial consultants at Fidelity, we will be very cognizant of that prior to do anything that's going to create taxable income for you.
All right, I'm going to give us a few key takeaways from our discussion. So number one, there is no one size fits all savings number. Your timeline, spending needs, and goals all play a role in determining when you can retire. Secondly, important to plan ahead. We talked a lot about planning, but plan ahead for any gaps in income or healthcare coverage. Fidelity advisors can evaluate options, model scenarios to help determine what may work best for your situation. And finally, keep in mind that retirement is about more than money. Plan for your financial needs and how you'll spend your time. So we hope you, our viewers, are inspired by this discussion. Please join us for our next 2-part Insights Live webinar series on August 13th and 20th, when we'll be doing a deep dive into managing healthcare costs and long-term care. In the meantime, reach out to your Fidelity representative to have your specific questions answered. And for more timely market updates and insights on other financial planning topics, subscribe to Insights from Fidelity Wealth Management for exclusive invitations to future wealth management webinars and access to our weekly newsletter. Thanks again to Jen and Jeff, and thank you so much for joining us.